Okay, welcome back. So what we're going to do is let me show you our blog. And we only have 3 pages for this, a little bit easier, but it's a little bit more detailed drawing in terms of cutting into shapes. So, and after this, we're moving into props and other fun stuff and vehicles and stuff like that. We've already been talking about additive principles of drawing. So there are sort of like, how do I say this? There are 2 principles of drawing in the way that we tend to draw and the way that we make things. Additive is something we've already been doing, but I haven't really described it to you or giving it a name to you yet. Additive is when we take shapes like primitives and we stack them on top of each other and we make something. Additive is great, and it's a way that most people draw. In fact, if you get into 3D modeling, it's the way that most modelers tend to model, is we basically in our brain take apart all the pieces of a chair, figure out what they are, model them, and then we put them all back together. So there's something to say about being a additive drawer or artist and thinking about the pieces that make something up. In fact, a huge part of figure drawing in the beginning is understanding additive shape arrangements and how a torso sits on a waist and a waist sits on a pelvis and how the legs connect to all that stuff, right? Right. So we're going to do only 1 page of additive interacting with each other, but we have it drawn them this way where we're going to have like a cylinder going into another cylinder, or we're going to have a sphere, hitting or touching the edge of another cube. Some of you might have done that, but we're going to spend a specific amount of time on it just to do that in page 1. The second page is when we're going to jump into subtractive. And subtractive is really important because subtractive drawing basically comes when we start drawing like a core shape. For example, like a leg exists inside a rectangle. After we draw that rectangular box, we then go in and we start carving off parts of the box to get the shape of the leg, to get the quadriceps, to get the patella, which is your kneecap, right? To get the indication of the bony landmarks, okay, from the femur. So those little items in figure drawing come from us having a good understanding of how we're subtracting from that shape. Okay, and that's actually, to me, a really fun part of drawing that changed the way that I draw, because I start thinking of my core shapes and I think about how to cut into them to make other elements. And that's what we're going to do. So here's an example of, it's a little bit of additive. And by the way, when we were drawing the organics and we would grab, I mentioned the word extrusion, when we would grab an object and pull it out, that is pretty much the same principle as additive, or adding another shape from an original, okay? But now we're going to be subtracting in, and so this example right here is a great example of a little bit of additive, but a lot of it is subtractive. And I will be talking about that in just a minute, okay? And yes, you can shade. If you want to pick a light direction coming from either left or right, you can put a little bit of value to make a nice little drawing like that, okay? This right here is another just simple example. You have an additive shape, so you add another shape to it. You wrap it with rubber bands, okay? There's a great example of subtractive, where you're taking a cube, and actually this is a great little hint right here, how to divide into shapes, as we just sort of draw random patterns on top of the cube, and then we recess them or cut into that cube. And it forces you to make shapes you probably would have never thought of before, okay? And who was it? Someone in here told me they saw this drawing in another class.
Digital drawing, Matsumoto.
So okay, which was funny because I drew this,
Yeah.
and it happened to be my sample that's up on somewhere on Google, and I don't know how it ended up here, but this was us. We'll talk about this later. This is us drawing through shapes with a center line, and then basically figuring out how to make spaceships or fish or whatever. Okay, all right. So I thought that was pretty neat. That would crack me up a little bit. And here's another great example of cutting into shapes and pulling out parts. Now, to some of you, this might look like very production design based, like you're building parts to go on a rocket ship. It's not. It's you figuring out how to really just carve into shapes that exist. And this will totally make sense when we leave this section and we start talking about drawing animals, or we talk about drawing fish, or we talk about drawing vehicles, or we're actually going to start with props first because props are easier. Okay, this will totally blend in and mesh to part of that, okay? And then there's another example here where here's a good example of like having one shape and then another shape cut into it, having a cylinder fit inside another cylinder. And what's really important is you can see what happens to part of the curves when shapes are interacting with each other. Now, that's an advantage of having a 3D software application because some of you might not be aware of what happens when you stick a cylinder into another cylinder, but you have to think about the circumference of that cylinder and how the other object that's going into it, where it's hitting itself. And that takes a little bit of practice and time. Okay? All right. So with that said and done, are there any questions on that? There's only 3 pages, which we can start working on today. And we'll go into tomorrow. Tomorrow, I can't talk. I didn't get much sleep last night, so my brain is on empty right now. I apologize for that. We'll start tonight, and then we'll work on it on Monday for a little bit, and then I'll probably give you guys another assignment. So I'm hoping between now, the rest of class, I'll do a demo for about half an hour, 40 minutes, and then as we tailor down and then go into Monday, you can wrap it up, and then towards the end of class, I'll give you a new assignment that deals with props, okay? I'm thinking about sometime next Wednesday about gathering all your sheets from you to make sure everybody's on track. That's something that I do. There's no grade, it's no quiz. It's just a way of me looking at your sheets and making sure you're up to speed. So if you are behind, try to get caught up this weekend. If there's a page you drew that you don't like and then you got bored and started drawing Gumby all over the side of the page, then erase Gumby and redraw the page, stick with the subject matter, get it done, okay? That way I keep people on track. The reason why I do those meetings is because sometimes students start to really fall behind, and if you start to really fall behind and you're not doing the work, then I'm going to tell you, I'm going to ask you why are you so behind and what do you need to do to pick up the pace. And because once we start moving into designing props, which is pretty much an example of this right here, we want to make sure that your props are looking good and you're motivating at a full speed and you're learning a lot and producing, okay? All right. No questions? Then let's dive into Sketchbook Pro. And is this recording? Just making sure. Yes, it is. Cool. All right. So on this one, I'm going to give you the decision-making ability of whether or not you want to have a horizon line. The only reason why I like having horizon lines is it forces me to consider and think about what it is I'm drawing and where it is. So if you don't want to do that and you want to do a bunch of down views, that's totally fine. Okay, what's going on? Where's my color option? It's not showing. Let me minimize, let me bring it back. And let's see, what color am I at now? Well, I'm on blue, that's fine. Okay, so what I'm going to do is let's just start with like a basic cube shape. Let's talk about our cube for a little bit here. In my mind, I like to keep my horizon line up a little bit higher when I'm sketching sometimes. So I know it's there, but I don't have to be exact to what I'm doing. Okay? So there we go. So there's my cube. I'm going to pretend my horizon line is up in this upper area right there. Actually, maybe a little lower. Right about there. So if I do want to draw something, I can still see underneath it. So what I'm going to do now, I have my base cube here. Let's say I want to carve a corner off of my cube. This is all I want you guys to do is start cutting into these shapes. All I have to do is I have to think about if I'm cutting a knife from here to there, and then if I come back over to here, all you have to do is erase what's there to figure out what's going to be seen. Okay? Where it gets a little bit more complicated is if we pick a random pattern If we go like this, and then we cut across to here, and we cut, oops, we cut across to here, and if I come in like this, and I'm just picking a random pattern, and then I decide to make that a cut line. So if I erase these lines right here, I then have to ask myself what's going to happen. These lines are going to fall downward, like so. And then once I erase this line here, I'm going to have this edge going through like so, right? I'm going to be able to see that part of the cube. And the same thing is going to happen here. That line's going to come down. That's going to come down. That's going to come down. Okay? So if I start doing this on a regular basis, and there's different ways to do it, I can draw a couple lines together, and then I could come in here, and I could erase part of that, and then I need to remember, what am I going to be seeing from this angle? I'm going to see that cube shape receding back to a vanishing point, right? So I'm going to see that type of dissection in it. Okay? So what I'd like you to do is really try to dissect up parts of your cubes, because you're sort of teaching yourself how to prepare yourself to cut into shapes. Okay, so that was an example of a base cube. And let's say, what if you don't do a cut all the way through the cube, but what if you do a cut on top of the cube? Like, what if I come over here and I say, hey, I'm going to take you, but I'm going to just push you inside. I'm going to end up with maybe something like this. Okay? So I basically took that little segment. Sorry, a little bit of slip on my ruler there. There we go. All right, and so I could keep going into this and keep dissecting into it. It's up to you on how far you want to push yourself and what you want to see that you could figure out. It's almost like a little bit of a puzzle, because there are times when you do more complicated cuts that you have to really think about, what am I seeing? So you realize, like on this cut, you're not going to see on top of that face there, okay? But you will see on top of that face there. So part of this task is you understanding what is going to be, what you're going to see from a different angle, okay? So that was a basic cube. What if I come over here, and what if I decide to take a longer rectangular shape, like so? And one of the reasons why we really want to get this, oops, I didn't draw that far enough. One of the reasons why this is so important is it gives us a solid understanding of not only are we drawing through shapes, but we're figuring out how we can properly cut into them and make other shapes. So when I'm working on like a house, the inside, if I'm going to draw a couch, I'm just going to take this shape right here. I'm going to draw a cube real quick, and then I'm just going to cut into it like this. I'm going to come back and erase that line right there. And I'm going to make sure that I can understand how this is all connecting together. So do you see how that turns into a piece of furniture right there? However, though it's not a piece of furniture yet, but it is the basics. It is the core shape of a piece of furniture. All I have to do now is come draw on top of it, clean up around it, and add a little rounded edge. Or if I wanted to follow an additive style of drawing, I could come in here and do this, and then I can add in what am I adding in right now? That's right. And I can do the same thing here. And once I come over and I get that put in, I can even just eyeball that line of the cushion. There. And let's say I even decide to come over here and erase this up. So that's how quick I can start making furniture, is I take basic shapes and I carve into them and I cut and I see where it takes me. Okay, so what happens if we take, let's try something on a cylinder. Okay. I know some of you might struggle getting that perfect cylinder shape. That's all right. I do too. I've never been a 100% like cylinder guy. Try to make them the best that I can. Right? Now, what's neat about this is that on a cylinder is when you cut into them, you need to figure out where the center line is in relationship to the object. And let me explain why. If I have another cylinder coming into this object right here, like so, I have to make a decision upon where these lines here are intersecting to that cylinder. And the reason why is that I have a curved surface going into another curved surface. So one little secret that you can do on this is if you draw a center line down part of your cylinder, and then you bring that center line down where it's hitting an object, okay, it gives you a little bit better understanding that, hey, I'm hitting right here. So when I hit here, not only am I going to have standard, I would have that rounded shape, right? But I'm also wrapping over the cylinder. The cylinder is wrapping this way. Does that make sense? Since it's wrapping that way, part of this, so if I were to draw a center line here, and if I were to bring this down to here, part of this is going to go a little bit further because it's wrapping down that shape, coming up that curve, and then comes back over there. Does that make sense? And that's a little bit harder to see. And to quickly show you, I do believe we do have Maya here. And this is one of the great things about Maya. So if I come over here, I have not used Maya in a while. And why is there it is. Frank has custom keys on here. Oh, is that what it is? I was like, why is it not working? Okay, thank you. So there we go. So here I have a cylinder, right? If I take that cylinder, I'm going to rotate it, get it exactly to be 90. This is what's cool about 3D. I can see how that cylinder hits. Do you see there? But then, so do you see there's a gap between those two? Does that make sense? That's why you can't just draw it being round from that point of view. That's correct, but you have to think about it, and that's one, it might be a little hard for you guys to figure out, but you'll figure it out over time because this shape right here has dedicated form on it. So this actually has to go in. And if I click the two, now you can see the difference. See how that curves down a little bit more? It's just not a base part going in, right? So this is one of the great things about having a 3D software is that you can come along and you can take chunks like this. And then to top it off, one of the cool things about Maya is I can take shapes like this and is it? I'm used to my hotkeys. Mesh booleans difference. So you see what I just did there? In Maya, it saves me time. I could take a chunk out of something. So then I could take this, and I could take that, and I could do it again. You see the new shape I get? So I can look at my shape, and I can figure out. See, and now it makes sense. That's basically what you're drawing. You guys are getting in there, and you're figuring out how to cut into all these different shapes and how to create these cool shapes like this. Okay? But you need to start with a core primitive. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to continue drawing here, and I'm just going to keep filling up my page of different shapes that I'm cutting into. And I don't care what core primitive you use. If you want to use triangles, if you want to try a sphere, it's completely up to you. But what I do want you to do is try to challenge yourself. Try to take shapes, draw through, cut through. It's a little bit more mathematical because we have to find what's on the other side. But if you do this and you do it correctly, you are improving your ability to understand how to draw and cut into other shapes. And if you can do that mentally, that will save you a tremendous amount of time when we start drawing with other things. Okay? Especially if we start talking about like mechs, or we start talking about robots and organics and vehicles. All that stuff comes into play in here. Okay? Any questions then? I'm going to, yes?
Am I allowed to use Maya if I need help figuring out a complex shape?
If you have a complex shape, yes, you can use Maya. But I would not take like a helix and do a boolean with a helix into like 5 cubes and create something super duper complex. Okay? Yeah. But yeah, have fun if you want to look at it, but just don't trace over it. Just use it to give you the answer and figure out part of the solution to your problem. Okay?
So we're doing one full page of additive and subtractive shapes?
So what I want you to do is just do, it's here on the blog, one page of additive core primitives, where you're adding, you have shapes interacting with each other, but you're adding them together. And you can make a prop if you like. Then we're going to do a page of subtractive, okay? And then we're going to do some organic shapes that are subtractive. So I haven't talked about that yet. And let me quickly go into that. These were core primitives. So an organic shape would basically be what you just finished. So for example, let's say I did this. Oops. Why is it coming out super low? Hold on a minute. We're having technical difficulties. Let me figure out what happened to all my tools. They've all poofed. Is it caps lock? Is it control, alt, tab? There it goes. It's tab. Okay. And I still have no color bar. I don't know what happened to that guy. So that's fine. Let me see if I can get in here and draw about what's going to happen with the organic. Why is it coming out super light? There. The layer's normal. Why is it doing that? This is flow. This is size of brush. So this is on 100% saturation. I don't see the color guide showing up at all. And let me see if I just have to grab that blue. There. Maybe it changed color a little bit. Okay, that should be fine. So here I have an organic shape, right? I'm going to come across here and draw a line up. Landing about there. Okay, so there's my organic shape. So now I'm going to cut into my organic shape. So if I want to come over here, let's say I want to take this segment like right there. I'm going to take that out, bring it all the way down here to the line. I'm going to come to here, I'm going to take that out. I'm going to come in and I'm going to erase this. Okay, I'm going to erase that. And I'm going to see that that's now going to cut across this way. And this line's actually going to dip down and go back down to where this would connect to it, right about there. Make sense? So that's how I would cut into that shape. Now, you could try something even a little bit more challenging, like what happens, and this is where the hard part becomes, is that you have to look at that surface changing. See that surface wrapping? So what if I come in here and I try to do like a weird angular cut out of there? I need to figure out if I can do that. So what if I come in here and I go, I'm going to cut you like that and then do that right there. So now I can erase this. I have an organic cut out of there. And I have to figure out that if this goes here, the line's going to come to about there. If I were to draw a dotted line down here, it's going to come through about there on the other side. Does that make sense? That's how that shape would cut through. So now when you do that organically, it's hard to see there, and that's the benefit of the shading part. So if I were to come in here and put some lines going across like this, it allows me to see the cut a little bit better. You see how I did that? And so that's a very effective way. That's why we start getting into the shading thing, is by doing this. It allows me to see where I cut into my shape a little bit more. Okay? And so I could do that on numerous spots. In fact, here, I might even decide, what if I come over here and put an angle cut coming in this way and make it a little bit more wider like that. So I'm going to have to figure out how this curves, and then I want to draw through and figure out where that's going to be on the other side. And that's it. And then I can see how it's working like that. Okay? And then it's come back again. You can put some lines on there. You can do it that way, or if you want to take a little bit of value, you can smear your pencil over it. It's up to you. It's just an easier way to do it. So that was one organic shape we had, right? Another organic shape we had was when we had these sort of like, I don't know what to call them. Like call them like little zygotes, where we had like a rounded shape, sort of like this. And one of the things with these is that they always have a nice flowing center line to help understand the contour of the shape. I don't like the way I finished that end there. So I'm going to fix it a little bit, like that, okay? There. So I have that organic shape, and if I want to come into that guy and I want to cut him up a little bit, I just have to look into it. And actually, part of the secret to cutting through is just drawing through the shape. So if you do that, if I come in here and I do this, I could figure out like, hey, I'm going to cut you right there. I'm going to take a chunk off of there. That's going to become a separate shape. And then this is going to be like that. And then maybe you decide to reattach. What if you want to reattach a little chunk like that? What if you want to come in here and say, you're going to be attached there. You're going to be attached there. And then I could come back in then and put some shaded lines in there. And if I decide to take a chunk out of here, from that particular view, I'm going to see that dotted line coming down, right? So when I do that, part of my line's in this shape. They're going to look like that. And then after I hit this edge, they're going to come back this way. See that? Okay. That's it. So I only gave you 3 pages this week because I know some of you are about done with your organics, but we have to talk about subtractive. That's why 1 page on additive, 2 on subtractive. Have fun and just do what I did. I mean, you should be able to knock out a page pretty quickly. You get to use, The first one is the additive. The second one is the base primitives, just subtractive, and then it's organic subtractive. And the organics start to become very fun because you can see how I can start making things visually. I'm basically making like my own silly putty. And I could take that silly putty and stretch it, arrange it. I could start making cars and vehicles and spaceships and all kinds of good stuff. Okay? Any questions? Is there a music preference for tonight?
The Smiths.
The Smiths are a great band. I got to see them live in concert once with Susie and the Banshees. So I will put on the Smiths. I know. That was the benefit of growing up in the 80s, was get to see them play live, and with Love and Rockets, another band from that time period. Okay, what I'm going to do real quick is pause this recorder. By the way, another thing, here I'm going to make a cut into that cylinder right here. So if you take a look at that, one of the things you have to do is if you're going to draw a cut this way, you want to follow the center line between those, bring it down and pick a point. That will give you the curve that goes from here to there. Do you see how I did that? And then it'll bring you the curve on the other side that will go from here to there. So then I can come in and if I erase that line, you can see how that cut shape would cut through. Make sense? Because something that's really fascinating about curves, and this will always help you remember how cylinders are working. When you get to lighting eventually, and you learn lighting, when light casts and hits a cylinder shape, the light ray comes in like this, and it hits here, and then the light ray does this. Does that make sense? Because what it's doing, if you were to draw a line from here to here, which would be the major axes of the circle, and then you were to wrap the elliptical shape like that. Does that make sense? That's how light wraps over an object. Because it's a cylinder and it's coming down at an angle. You would draw that sort of main axis line through it. In fact, on that note, anytime you guys are in here, and if you take a circle, let me see if I can draw a great circle. Ready? Perfect circle. Nope. I'm cheating because I'm using a tool right here that's an autocorrect. Here, let me show you. See this? And what it does, watch, if I make a line, it straightens the line for me. You see that? Watch. It's pretty cool. So when you go to make, watch this ellipse. See, it straightened it for me and made it perfect edges. It's a cool little tool in Sketchbook, but here, let me try to get that circle. Anyway, let's say that's my circle shape like this. That's important to understand the major and minor, because if I cut through this like that, that's just a line. I have to understand how that ellipse is going through. Like that, right? And then once I get that shape in there, then I could draw another one over here. And then I could see how those shapes cut into each other. So there's a place for understanding that major and minor axes. And in case you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going to draw it for you right here and just explain it like this. In perspective, when we have an ellipse, that's probably a really bad box I just drew, but it'll do okay for right now. Okay? If I cross this up, find the middle, find my curve endpoints, and if I come in here, let me try that again. Oops. That was horrible. I'm trying to do it without having to stand. And that's what I hate about the Cintiq. I can't twist it, so I have to stand like this. That's a little bit better. So when I get my circle that's in there, right, I have, and here's the important thing to remember, you have two lines going across that circle. You have, these are called the axes lines. You have a minor, oh my God, I can't even talk. You have a major and a minor axes, right? So what is the major axes right now? It is this line. It is the biggest line. Does that make sense? The minor axis is the smaller line between the two. So when I go to do a cut through a shape, if I draw that minor axis, I understand where the curves are hitting it, and it allows me to get that ellipse perfectly inside my drawing. Okay? Cool. That was a bad example on my part, so I'm going to delete it. I'm still here. I'm just drawing. Just cutting into stuff, having fun. Trying to do a more... let me repeat the shape that I just did. Let me show you how... One of the secrets to what we're doing, so I usually save this for the next class, but I'll mention it now. One of the little secrets that I'm hoping you're going to learn is when I talked about the major axes, is understanding the use of a center line. So let me see the shape I just drew here on the left. I'm going to draw another one for you, and I'm going to walk you through what I did. So this is how I started. I drew a line that went across. I came here to the middle, and I draw that center line. Came back down, I drew the center line going this way, right? And that's what I call that upside down T. Remember that? Now, what I did is I came up here and I drew a line to the top of this. And then I made sort of a dotted line coming down to here. I did the same thing this way. And then I sort of rounded it to about there, right? When that was done, I then throw the center line going down the object. So this center line here is the center line on the back of the object. So if I draw the center line coming down the front of the object, it's going to look like that. It's going to connect to that point. Does that make sense? Then I'm going to darken this line that's around it because that line is going to come down and then sort of smooth over and come down about here. And then we're going to have that. Oops, a little bit of slip there on the Cintiq. Then I'm going to have that. So now when I have that, one of the secrets to cutting into this is using that center line to my advantage, and it'll make sense right here at the very end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend I have a sharp blade, and I'm just going to chop that right in half, right? So I'm going to throw a curve over where I'm going to chop it. Now, you might be wondering, well, where do I end that curve? Remember this straight line right here? If I make a line that's sort of parallel to that goes this way, I can follow that curve to where it ends. Do you see that? And then watch, I'm going to do the same thing further down here. I'm going to wrap that over, follow that line going sort of parallel. Where that line comes down to there, that's going to be the angle of that cut. So now I'm going to go in and I'm going to erase lines that are no longer there. Okay? And this is where the center line is key, is you see that center line in the back that's there? If I bring this from here back to there, it shows what just happened to that cut. That line is wrapping and cuts through, and it's the same thing with this line coming right down there on the back side. Does that make sense? That's the back side of that. So when I do that, like that, that's how I get that really nice, efficient cut into that shape. Okay? And then I could come over and I put my little hatching lines, and then that helps show. But underneath here, if you look really lightly, you can see, oops, use my ruler, that I have that straight center line that's going right down there. So that's another example of why center lines are really, really important to me. Okay, because it allows me to cut through. And once we start talking about how to draw vehicles, cars, motorcycles, whatever your little heart desires, people, characters, head ball shapes. Okay, so one of the first things, I don't know if you guys have seen some of the other demos that I do, but I do a lot of character stuff. So one of the first things I do, like if I'm drawing turtles, I start with a really loose sphere like this, and I already do it out of habit. I throw a line right down the middle. And that middle line allows me to understand where that jaw line is coming in, and then I understand where the center line of that jaw line comes down, and it allows me to figure out how the eyes are, because if that's the center line there, then I know that eye on the other side is going to be about right there. Does that make sense? That's huge, because part of character design is understanding what's on the other side. So if I come over here and I'm drawing this correctly, once I come over and then start to put in my little details, maybe he's a sad turtle, he's got big eyes, and then I could come over here and then start to push this line, and maybe he's got like a little crunchy face or whatever. But all of this is built off of that foundation of understanding that that's a center line. So this really equals this. That was a pretty good circle, by the way, almost getting there. That equals that, and understanding that if I have an eye here and it's wrapping this way, then the other eye is going to be right here on that side. Does that make sense? That's how we figure out, that's where this is taking us in the long run. And guess what? That is also, the same thing in the human figure when we have a torso of an individual. And when we have an arm that's right here, one of the most common mistakes in figure drawing is as you come in here and you draw that arm of your individual, let's say the arm is going to the waist. That's their hand, right? You want to draw the arm on the other side, but you don't take the time to do this, to draw a center line and then figure out that shape is right here on the other, that shape is right here on the back side. Does that make sense? Because that's the starting point of that shoulder. So if I know that, then I could correctly draw the angle of the limb coming out like this. See that? And I could foreshorten it correctly too. Then I could draw the elbow, and then I can draw the foreshortened forearm, and then I can come back here and draw the hand. Make sense? So that's huge when later on when we get to figure drawing, we start talking about drawing through the shape, because you have arms that do that on both sides, you have legs that do that on both sides, all that contributes. So all of this up here is related to this guy down here, because it's about understanding my line, my shape with a dedicated center line inside it. Okay? All right, cool. See how far back I can go. That's it. All right. And don't be afraid to use your horizon line if you want. If you want to pick any random point on your horizon line and you want to use that to draw a line like that and to create an organic, go for it. Nothing wrong with that. Now I'm going to get cantankerous, and I'm going to do a floating pancake. And then I'll cut into that. So I'm going to come up here above my horizon line, living life on the edge. I'm going to raise the edge of my floating pancakes here. Now here I placed a very wide cut. Do you see that line up there? And since it's a lot wider, the way you figure that out is if you draw through it, what you have to do is where you sort of have these rounded edges, you have to come back and draw through the other side to figure out how that cut. So it's an angled cut because it's going at two different directions. So as I have to do, what really helps me is connecting and finding these patterns right in here like that. So then I got to figure out if it cuts through there on the other side. I did not draw this cut going all the way through that side. You see that? So technically it's going to cut here, but then it might start. So this might come up here. Part of that shape might dip down, cut through into here. And if I were to do a center line on that, I'm going to think of finding that shape in there, how it rounds. And then actually part of that line is going to come back to there and it's going to curve back in here because my center line cut is about there, but then the center line that wraps this way comes through, wraps there, comes back around. It's going to hit here and it's going to go up to there and come over. So that's a little bit more complicated, but I hope that makes sense. I'm trying something that's different. A little bit more angled. And if you want to overlap shapes, you can. Like if I have one shape there, I'm going to come behind here and I'm going to draw another organic shape coming through here. First thing as I do, that's how tired. First thing as I do, talk no more, good I am. Tired because sleep no more last night. Does that sound better? There. So first thing I do is I find that T right there. Once I get that T in, that center line mass really helps me figure out what I'm going to be seeing on that other side. And once I get that in, I can do whatever I want in terms of a dedicated line. Okay. And it's just Do you see how without me even drawing any more lines on there, I can already see through the shape? That's huge right there. That right there is worth its weight in gold. And it's just so easy for me because anything I want to do, watch. If I want to cut this like that, any angle I want to cut it, I just cut it. I bring that line back across to the other side. I see where it's cutting through. I then draw a dotted line on how that connects. Let's say I make this other cut line even at more of an extreme angle like that. Maybe it's a curve cut. Once I do that, I can get that over to the other side. I can figure out where that goes, like that. And then it allows me just to quickly erase some of this. And I can figure out exactly how that shape is going to round in and what's going to be seen right there. And then, just to double check it on your own, your center line comes to here. That center line should come down and hit the bottom of that line there. And then when it does, I could just come in here then and oh gosh, that opacity thing happened again, or something's going on that's weird. My pen's not working. We've had lots of problems this semester with the new Windows 10 version and Sketchbook working correctly. They're not working too good, and it's been driving us nuts. Okay, so see how easy that was to cut that up? It's really simple when I have the other side to look at. Without that other side, I'm sort of lost. And even if I don't take it all the way through, even if I, wait, how did that happen? Did you see that? My pen size just increased magically on its own. I didn't even do anything. I'm just sitting here drawing. Thanks Sketchbook Pro and Windows 10 for working together. All right, let me see if this works better. So look here, I'm just going to cut through. I don't even have to go all the way down. It's just the fact that I understand I can just draw through. I can figure out what's on the other side, and then I can get that cut in there. I can figure out what's going to be seen. And then where that center line is sort of coming down, I can bring that back down. I can see how it would go right back down to there, come back over my object like so down to there. Okay. I'm going to get rid of my couch so I can keep drawing fun shapes here. Let me pause real quick. I think on this little demo I'm going to do on this shape, I'm going to start with a cube. I'm going to overlap part of this cube shape, I think. And as I draw into this, I think what I'm going to do is do a little bit of additive and subtractive at the same time. So see, there's my base cube, okay? Just for trying to be, I should make a slogan. Try to be a better artist. Draw through the other side, right? No, I know that sounds dorky, but it's true. Okay, so what I'm going to do first, after my cube shape is here, is you're going to throw a brief center line in there. I like center lines. It helps me anchor things down and see what's happening. I'm going to go ahead and pull something out of there. Let's do a little bit of additive first, okay? So let's just start with another cube. I'm going to get another cube shape that's similar in there. Then I'm just going to pull that up. And remember, as we get closer to that horizon line, our cube angle is going to drop down quite a bit. It's going to be something similar to like that. We're barely going to be able to see on top. And even there, I'm not plotting it to points right now, but I might have just, made it a little too thick. Might even be a little bit thinner. Okay, so I'm going to get something there. And then let's come over here, and I'm going to pull something out down here. All right, and drawing real quick. So a couple of my lines are a teeny bit off, but that's all right for right now. And maybe I'm going to take this bottom level, pull that out a little bit more. Okay. Maybe I'll add another shape on the end here like this. And just to not be so symmetric, I'm going to throw the line forward a little bit more as I bring that line back. There, okay? So let me just outline part of the shapes that I have so they pop out a teeny bit more. Go. And I think one of the first cuts I'm going to do is I just want to pretend I have like invisible liquid pouring down the cube that's maybe melting it. So I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to put a line that goes down to here. I'm going to bring that line back over to about there and cut through about there. And I'm going to just sort of try to keep that parallel, bring it to that edge. Actually, I don't want to bring it to the edge. Let me bring it a little bit before. And then when it hits here, part of that line is going to go, that's why I didn't want to bring it to the edge, across to right here. And maybe it's going to end about there. Okay. Just gonna redraw that line to get it a little crisp because I keep having this problem in here where my pen size keeps getting bigger. There, so I can see that cut through happening right there. And then when it hits here, I'm going to drop a line through there. And then it sort of comes through there. Maybe I also put a cut coming down into here. And that cut's going to come here. When it hits here, it's going to go, oops. Then it's going to come across to that edge, and then it'll dip down past that line. So now I'm going to erase part of that inside shape. And this where it gets a little tricky because this line's going to drop down like that. That's going to be cut there. But then you could almost see there's going to be, if that cuts into here, you're going to have this light curve into there. There, it cuts into that shape. Erase part of that. And then technically, we can't see it, but if this was a line, center line coming this way, it would come back and join about back there. So what I can do is just put some trace lines going in that direction that help indicate part of the direction of that pattern. And down here, that's going to connect back to over there. Okay. Maybe we'll come over here and let's cut a chunk out of there. Cut a chunk to there. And then as that hits here, the line's going to go, oop, let me stay straight. And then it's going to drop down there. Okay, so I'm going to erase those interior lines. I'm going to receive that line back. Okay, cool. Oops. Fix this line there, that's off. Try to cut a little segment out of there. So remember the first exercise, we were wrapping stuff with rubber bands, right? I'm still doing that on my shapes just to figure out how the cross contour sections get cut in there. Does that make sense? Like, look at this odd shape. I just was thinking of like half a circle, then maybe bowed out and had some other little curves into it. So I have to really figure out how these cross sections get in here. And if I just sort of keep them parallel, it allows me to do that. So then when I want to get in here and I want to splice through this object, it gives me a better idea of figuring out how to do it correctly, if that makes sense. Oops, a little bit of slip there. Be a little bit more about there. And then let's just take a shape in here that's random, like that. And I'm going to take that shape and then I'm going to just extrude it out. And to extrude it out in an additive process, I'm just going to draw a line from the center, get that in there, draw a line wrapping over it, and then bring a line back down to the middle here, and wrap it with a couple rubber bands so I can see the form on it. Okay? Here, I'm just drawing the center lines from the outside of the shape. So I'm treating it like a wall. I'm just sort of drawing this wall first with that wall. And then same thing here, that's the center line for that edge that goes up to there. Now that I have those walls sort of drawn, then I could add in the curves that would go from point to point. So maybe this curve slopes down and comes to here. And that's that cut through section. Maybe part of that comes up to about here and it does sort of the same thing. Same thing here. have no idea where I'm going with this, but I'm just sort of having fun with that. All right, I'll stop it right here. So there's my page, right? Just lots of different hard edge shapes, rounded shapes, organic shapes, just cutting into them. I'm going to pause right here. I'm going to go in to make it look really pretty for the end of the demo. I'll put a little bit of airbrush on. I'll choose light coming from the left side so I can accentuate the form with shadow on the right. And then I'll finish that up and I will render that up and put it up, link it up to the website for you guys, to the blog site for you guys to watch, okay? Any questions? If you get stuck, don't get frustrated. Call me over. I'll come help you. And we'll play some more music and you guys can enjoy the rest of the class.